but I'm just a guy that woke up after 30 years and realized that I was living in a state of conflict. Conflict with who I feel I am in my core, and conflict with who the
Blake Lively is demanding her day in court, claiming the defendants are trying to dodge accountability for what she calls a hostile environment during production. A new allegation has also surfaced, with claims that Justin Baldoni yelled at a producer, "Welcome to Popcorn Planet, I'm Annie Signor and we're live." This story is absolutely bonkers. The Deadline report and Blake Lively's newly released response, which dropped today, are heavily redacted, and from our early analysis there's very little substance in it. It feels like the goalposts are being moved yet again to justify allegations of harassment, while Deadline appears, at least to me, unusually aligned with her narrative. The irony is hard to ignore. You can sign up and become a member to access original content not available on YouTube. This isn't about MISS, about independent and digital journalism. And we can't let this kind of pressure stand. As a journalist and a news network, we operate across multiple platforms, and your support helps make that possible. Thanks to all of you, we're closing in on our fundraising goal, and I'm incredibly grateful for the support that's helping build this war chest. As for the filing itself, Lively now argues that the defendants are trying to deny her day in court by throwing the kitchen sink at her retaliation claims, specifically rejecting Baldoni's motion for summary judgment. She insists she deserves to be heard, though that only applies if there's actually a viable case. The filing frames her as an experienced industry veteran and mother of four who simply wanted a safe and respectful workplace, pushing back against the idea that she acted as a bully who took over the film. Interestingly, it feels like her legal team is already anticipating that narrative and attempting to neutralize it in advance. The heavily redacted 72-page document aggressively attacks the defendants, but to me, it reads less like a strong rebuttal and more like an attempt to stay ahead of damaging perceptions that may already be taking shape. Lively may be a movie star, holding consolidated power as lead actor, producer, director, and executives who supposedly control her schedule, pay, and working conditions. That narrative simply doesn't hold up. Anyone familiar with this case knows the schedule was constantly being moved at Blake and Ryan's request, whether it was concert, illness, family priorities, or Ryan pushing to rearrange production for personal time. To suggest they had no influence over scheduling is blatantly misleading. The idea that they controlled her salary or authority is equally questionable, especially given the unresolved contract issues. The filing claims they appeared on set daily and were therefore in charge of HR concerns and workplace conditions, yet somehow Blake and Ryan are portrayed as powerless, despite overwhelming evidence of their influence over Justin and others involved in the production. The suggestion that they didn't leverage their status, connections, or industry power to get their way is hard to take seriously. This framing feels less like a factual account and more like an attempt to deflect accountability. Roll out something Ryan should also be answering for. The entire argument comes across as reversing victim and aggressor roles in a textbook Darvo-style defense. The opposition filing also alleges that Heath and Baldoni used their close friendship to act with impunity and cover for one another, while ignoring similar behavior on Blake's side, such as aligning producers, pressuring studios, and isolating Justin during production. The motion opposing summary judgment is heavily redacted, making it difficult to fully assess the claims. But the available pages raise more questions than answers. One section repeatedly references Alex Sachs, alleging gender-based marginalization and mistreatment during It describes incidents where Baldoni allegedly yelled, interrupted, and once slammed his hands on a chair near Sachs before storming off, prompting her to warn Sony representatives that she would walk off the film if it happened again. Sachs reportedly felt sidelined as the only woman in a senior producing role and claimed Baldoni was dismissive toward screenwriter Hall, whom he allegedly did not respect as a female voice, an assertion that feels especially ironic given Blake and Ryan's well-documented rewrites of Hall's script. Despite attempts to minimize that fact, text messages and documentation reportedly show the script was heavily rewritten. The filing then turns to Alex Sachs' deposition, which is now part of the record, with additional commentary being reviewed to ensure accuracy and proper context as the case continues to unfold. Just to clarify and correct the record, Alex Sachs appears to have been involved from the very beginning and may have been hired by Sony, so I want to acknowledge that if I previously misstated her role. With that in mind, let's go directly to Alex Sachs' deposition, because the filing makes a point of highlighting her statement about potentially walking off the movie. This deposition is where she actually addresses that incident. On page 11 of the 83-page deposition, the questioning centers around an email written by Justin Baldoni in which he apologizes to the group, specifically naming Alex. When asked what she understood Baldoni to be apologizing for, Sachs explains that the day before, they had been on a call or Zoom where he yelled at her. When pressed further, She confirms that he raised his voice but cannot recall exactly who else was on the call, though she believes it included people from Sony and others on the email chain. She also states that she does not remember much about the meeting itself and cannot recall the specific words Baldoni used or the exact opinion she was voicing at the time, only that when she tried to speak, he yelled at her. The questioning then turns to Baldoni's email, where he says he failed at being a safe space for others and apologizes for behavior he admits was not acceptable, particularly interrupting women, including sex. When asked whether she agrees that he failed at being a safe space for others, Sachs responds that she has no idea, notably declining to endorse that broader characterization. When asked whether he failed to be a safe space for her personally, she replies that she didn't need him to be a safe space for her, which is an interesting and measured response that neither excuses his behavior nor escalates it beyond what she experienced. Sachs does agree that his yelling during production was not acceptable, explaining simply that she does not yell at colleagues and does not like being yelled at herself. She confirms that Baldoni did interrupt her while she was speaking and acknowledges that this happened on more than one occasion. However, when asked whether she observed him interrupting other women, she says she cannot recall. This is important because while she acknowledges specific tense interactions between herself and Baldoni, she does not confirm a broader narrative of systemic hostility toward women or an unsafe environment as a whole. Taken together, her testimony reflects a workplace conflict involving raised voices and interruptions, which she clearly found inappropriate, but it does not fully support the more expansive claims being advanced elsewhere. Toward the end of this section, the deposition shifts to a different time period, and the focus moves away from this particular incident. C. To clarify and correct the record, Alex Sachs appears to have been involved from the very beginning of the project and may have been hired by Sony, so I want to acknowledge that if I previously misstated her role. With that correction in mind, it's important to go directly to Sachs' deposition, because the filing emphasizes her statement about potentially walking off the movie, and this is where she actually addresses that claim. On page 11 of the 83-page deposition, the questioning focuses on an email written by Justin Baldoni in which he apologizes to the group and specifically names Alex. When asked what she understood Baldoni to be apologizing for, Sachs explains that the day before the email, they had been on a call or Zoom during which he yelled at her. When pressed further, she confirms that he raised his voice but cannot recall exactly who else was on the call, though she believes it included people from Sony and others on the email chain. She also states that she does not remember much about the meeting itself and cannot recall the specific words Baldoni used or the exact opinion she was expressing at the time, only that when she attempted to speak, he yelled at her. The questioning then turns to Baldoni's email, in which he says he failed at being a safe space for others and apologizes for behavior he admits was unacceptable, particularly interrupting women, including Sachs. When asked whether she agrees that he failed to be a safe space for others, Sachs responds that she has no idea, notably declining to endorse that broader characterization. When asked whether he failed to be a safe space for her personally, she replies that she didn't need him to be a safe space for her. A measured response that neither excuses his behavior nor amplifies it beyond her own experience. Explaining simply that she does not yell at colleagues and does not like being yelled at herself, she confirms that Baldoni interrupted her while she was speaking and acknowledges that this occurred more than once. However, when asked whether she observed him interrupting other women, she says she cannot recall. This distinction matters, because while she acknowledges specific tense interactions between herself and Baldoni, she does not confirm a broader narrative of systemic hostility toward women or an unsafe environment overall. Taken together, her testimony describes a workplace conflict involving raised voices and interruptions conduct she clearly found inappropriate, but it does not fully support the more expansive claims being advanced elsewhere. Toward the end of this section, the deposition shifts to a different time period, and the focus moves away from this particular incident. It does sound like, at least at one point in these discussions, the incident may have occurred while they were filming a fight scene, which means everyone could have been operating in a heightened, emotionally charged mode. That doesn't make it okay, and I think we can all agree that people should strive to do better. But I still struggle to understand why this moment is being positioned as central to Blake's sexual harassment claim. That's what's most frustrating. She's attempting to frame this as an unsafe environment, pointing to his apology as some kind of gotcha. But when I read that apology, it actually comes across as someone showing self-awareness and maturity. Someone trying to course-correct rather than double down. He wasn't continuing to yell. He was acknowledging the issue and trying to address it. None of this reads as malicious or abusive to me. As you dig deeper, and based on what I've heard from crew members, it's fair to say there were challenges on set. Justin was relatively inexperienced at that level of production and struggled at times to make the day, meaning getting all the required shots completed on schedule. Not every director has the luxury of endless takes like a David Fincher or a Christopher Nolan, especially without massive budgets. For a passionate, creatively driven director, that pressure can easily translate into frustration, particularly when time, money, and expectations are all colliding. That doesn't excuse raised voices, but it does help explain the context. Meanwhile, he's under stress in the director's chair while Blake is pushing to take control of the edit and other creative elements of what was essentially his project. To Alex Sachs' credit, her deposition supports this broader picture. At the bottom of page 26 of 83, she's asked about her impressions of Baldoni's performance during Phase 1. She says he seemed deeply overwhelmed and, despite extensive prep, often unprepared on a daily basis for various reasons. When asked whether it's fair to say she didn't find him to be an effective director, she responds, "Not necessarily," noting there are many facets to consider before the questioning moves on. That assessment lines up exactly with what I've been told independently, that the primary criticism of Justin was that he was overwhelmed. Frankly, for anyone who has worked in production, that's hardly shocking. Filmmaking is intense, messy, and relentless, especially on a project that was further complicated by industry strikes and COVID disruptions. The stress level around this situation is honestly off the charts. But when you step back and look at it all, I still don't see anything that justifies how massive this battle has become. What I do see is a counter-campaign spin, retaliation, and narrative control, using friendly outlets like Deadline to keep reframing the story in her favor. The continued implication that Justin Baldoni is somehow the worst person in Hollywood just doesn't hold up. I don't see it. I really don't. I can't imagine people in Hollywood reading this without rolling their eyes and asking whether this is seriously what all of this chaos, money, and legal maneuvering is about. This feels far more like an effort to save face and wield power and resources to shut things down than a pursuit of real accountability. And the fact that she's now coming after us only reinforces that point. There's simply no reason to keep escalating this. Now even the judge has been pulled into the swirl, and there's still so much more to unpack. My lawyer was supposed to join us but got tied up, and we'll bring him back soon. Kim will also be back shortly. It's always great to hear from you. Kim, to everyone watching, thank you for the continued support. If you want to help us keep going, head over to Popcorn Planet and hit sign up. It's the best way to support what we do. And documentaries, because yes, we are a real news network working across multiple projects. You can also visit the homepage to find donation options. We truly appreciate all of you. There's much more coming, and we are not backing down. More coming, and we are not backing down.